I had emotionally numbed out more than I ever had in my life. I played more video games. I scrolled on social media. I was just a consumer. I lived in a life of distraction and dissociation. So here I have this wife weeping in front of me saying, hey, I can't go through this again. And I'm just looking at her with no ability to empathize.
It is pushing masculinity entirely on the woman and saying, you be the man, I'm going to go play video games and look at porn. It is such a betrayal, the core dynamic of what marriage is supposed to be, that it is very hard for a woman to regrow that respect for him in time.
A lot of the men who are in the same position as you, as Brendan, they're struggling with a huge amount of shame and they're struggling with a huge amount of guilt, which is why we actually don't usually hear this type of story.
What did you do that turned you into a different husband? What makes a husband with an addiction to adult content and a secret life finally turn around and embrace his responsibilities as a husband? And what can a wife be doing? In fact, what must a wife be doing to help her husband reach that place of better health so that he craves to step forward and be the masculine man in their family that he is supposed to be? To answer these questions, we're bringing in Brandon Doerksen, a man who has lived this experience and is ready to tell you everything that he saw at the bottom of his marriage. Brandon, I'm glad to have you here because you and I agree on a very, very key point, which is that the man must be the one to take the steps forward in a relationship first. Where there's a relationship dynamic where the woman doesn't feel safe, doesn't feel loved. I know I saw some of your story online. I was just checking out your Instagram to refresh my memory on everything. You had some tracks on there about the man not knowing how to handle a woman's emotions, and that's why they back off. You've had pieces on there before talking about your wife and your experience and your personal journey as well. I know a lot of our audience is eager to dig in here because I think they've heard me say it many times over the last year. It is the man's job to provide safety first. Otherwise, the woman can't step into the feminine role ever. She can't. He has to provide that safety first. Can you tell us a little bit more about what was your journey like coming to that realization, and why is that the core of your focus now?
Well, I wish I had a really valiant answer, but basically, it's like falling off of a moving vehicle, hitting the ground and rolling a few times is how I learned. So Adam and Andre, thank you for having me on the show. I was going to lose my marriage if I didn't do something different than I had already been doing. Trying to do the exact same thing, but just trying harder wasn't producing a result. I had been in ministry for many years. My wife and I actually met in Ecuador doing nonprofit work, and we came home and I thought just getting married was just like this self-improvement plan. Like, okay, now I can finally have sex. Now I get like this ego boost. I step in the room. I got my girl with me. And what I was not aware of was she actually has desires and emotions. And there's going to be this, not possibility, but certainty that I will do something to disappoint her, to upset her. And I had never had this experience. I had dated before. And even in our dating relationship, we jumped straight to let's get married, which I'm happy we did. But I had never had somebody really look at me and challenge me for the way I was acting. Like you guys were, joking around with each other before the show. Guys mess around, we say, hey, come on, do better. But it's like when your beloved is looking at you saying, you have deeply wounded me, and you're looking back at this hurt person, you're like, I don't know what to do with that. I've never experienced that in my life. Other people say, hey, you dropped the ball, you missed the winning shot, you could have done better. But most people don't confront you the way your spouse does. And nobody really told me like, hey, your spouse, not only are they going to confront you, but you can't ignore it. And I had lived a life of distraction where when things got hard, I played more video games. I scrolled on social media. And I was just a consumer. I lived in a life of distraction and dissociation. And getting married with a very strong, competent, level-headed, clear-minded, communicating woman, I didn't know what to do with that. Because she's like, hey, I'm hurting. And I can't just go look at my phone right away or go hide on I tried hiding on my phone. I tried hiding behind video games, but that just made her more upset because she was looking for me to confront the issue at hand. And so would love to dive deeper onto how I finally did that right before we were about to lose our marriage. So that's just a little bit of a snapshot of why I think this is so important that men in the mess know how to take action and know how to shift their perspective to get unstuck. I think it's so important.
Gotcha. You checked out my work. I'm the attachment specialist. I focus on attachment theory. Are you familiar with attachment theory and the styles?
Enough to be dangerous. No,
Cool.
I hear people reference it, so I have a broad understanding. A guy in my men's community said that he had been through one of your programs and needed to re-go through it again. So some of the guys in my community are familiar with your work, but
Right on.
at a broad level, I understand attachment, but it's not my expertise.
Understood. Are you familiar with the styles? Would you be able to tell us maybe what you and your wife were at the time?
We never dove into our specific attachment styles in that season, nor have we really labeled what we were walking through.
Okay. Would you like to?
Sure. Well, yeah. Why don't you? I'm happy. Why don't through your assistance, I'd be happy to.
Cool. Hey, thank you. I appreciate that. What I tend to see is a lot of dynamic of one partner's usually more anxiously attached, which all that means is that person is not believing that they are worthy of love. So they're chasing love endlessly. They're trying to get approval. That's their mechanism for safety, is actually making the other person happy and getting approval from them. So they're endlessly cycling on, please love me, please love me, please love me. They have a lot of unclear expectations. They give everything away, give you the shirt off their back, plus the skin too. And they will never ask you for anything in return, but they expect something in return, secret contracts. What my mentor, Dr. Glover, calls covert contracts. And a lot of times the woman is the anxious, but often the man is the anxious. And then we have the opposite side, the avoidance side. This usually means that they distance themselves from emotional connection. They believe other people are the problem. They don't believe that other people will ever be honest with them, really, or trustworthy during conflict. They tend to pull away and solve problems themselves. They don't understand emotional closeness, nor do they particularly want it. They don't want to be alone or lonely, but they also don't really understand if there is a difference for them, that they could ever be close to someone and it could count. And these two tend to get together and everything is okay for the first 6 or 7 months. And then all of a sudden a real crisis hits and one person is begging, please don't leave me, please don't leave me. And the other one is saying, please leave me alone. I need to pull away and cool myself off and then solve this problem all alone by myself. Get out of my way. And that's basically a rough overview. Does that map onto anything you guys were experiencing?
Can you have both anxious and avoidant?
You can have both. I'm glad you asked. This is what we call disorganized style, which just means cannot be organized into either side neatly. So you can have a blend of anxious and avoidant. You can be primarily avoidant with some anxious tendencies and flip-flop, and you can be primarily avoidant, running away, screaming, but still creeping back, desperate for that love and connection.
Yeah. I would say I would if I were to describe myself in that season through that lens, I would say I was probably on the anxious attachment with some of the avoidant piece. The avoidant was more like covert, kind of like, I don't like how this feels. So I'm, like I mentioned, I'm going to either take care of this through seeking out inappropriate content online, if we're not being intimate, to try to meet my needs separately from my wife. And then the goal is a secure attachment, correct? That's
yes,
what
you got it exactly.
That's what the landing strip is.
Target.
Okay, I hadn't heard too many other words thrown around in the attachment realm. What's interesting, and I don't think this is everybody's case. So I'm not saying this is for all marriages out there, but I would describe my wife from when we got married as having a secure attachment, meaning she didn't really have any coping mechanisms. She was okay expressing frustration, but it was very like directed and clean and clear. And so one of the things that I found really interesting is I was basically like running away from her. Like, you want connection? Like, this is making me uncomfortable, because it was so concentrated and like appropriate that what she was asking or desiring, that I was just like, it was sending off all of the red alerts. And I didn't know why. My nervous system couldn't handle it. And we actually were in ministry together. So we spent a lot of time together. but not all of it was quality time. So she would then say she wanted quality time. I'm like, look, we've been around each other all day. Isn't that like quality time? And, but it was really interesting. I kind of credit, I don't think in I know every marriage is different, but in our situation, what brought about my brokenness so strongly was how clear my wife was on the type of connection she wanted in our relationship. And and we spent all this time together, and it basically like sped up our whole journey, where it was like, we didn't have to wait until we were 50. We got married at 21. I was 21. My wife was 19. And by the time we had been married 5 years, it was like, we had been married 30 years, and we were like, we got to get through this or this is done. Like there was no, let's go through the cycle one more time where you've been lying to me and hiding things on your phone, and let's go meet with a counselor. Let's read another book. My wife's like, look, I'm not going through that again. I will not go through that cycle again with you. We're going to go to the root system, which is what we're really big on in our work. Is I think a lot of couples try to like stack a bunch of tools into their tool belt, which is phenomenal. I want conversation tools. I want to understand attachment. I want everybody's tools. Whatever helps me is great. But I think a lot of couples have these underlying addictions or secrets that no matter how many tools you have, you're not going to want to be close to somebody you're lying to. You're not going to be close to somebody that you ultimately know you're keeping things from. And that's where we do differ from a lot of, not marriage therapists. It's not necessarily just therapists. It's just common marriage encouragement or advice is kind of, you do your men's stuff over here and women do their women's stuff over there. And that's what I really tell guys is like, look, if you want your marriage to change, go ahead and let your wife know you're having an emotional affair with your secretary. Like, newsflash, like we can't just tool stack out of your emotional affair. We have to start with reality. Reality is, yeah, I do flirt with her at lunch. You know, it hasn't gotten physical yet, but yeah, I do flirt with her. It's like, okay, and we think this adding another tool is going to help your relationship get better. And you wonder why your wife feels closed off and you feel anxious when she's like looking at your phone. Oh, she didn't see my text. It's like, well, we got to go to the root. So that's what I'm really big on which it's messy. I get why pastors, counselors, mentors, neighbors, they don't tell you do the hardest thing, which is being honest and forthright with your spouse on secrets you're keeping. But for me, that's the starting place. That was the starting place for us.
Interesting. Okay. So she has modeled more secure attachment throughout the course of your relationship?
Yeah. I mean, like that's like what's fun is like the moment I stepped into maturity and stepped into like being okay with us being not okay for like 5 to 10 minutes to like have a hard conversation or for her to be upset. That didn't mean the relationship was over. Once I became okay with that, it was like, wow, this is pretty fun. Like, I really enjoy being married to you. We're having a great time. Our kids are flourishing. Our bodies are flourishing. I love being married to you. It was when I was trying to live with the secrets and the disconnect and trying to create distance to cope with the relationship. That's when it was miserable. But the moment I got back online and my body was back online and my emotions were working for me instead of against me, then the relationship became what it is today, which is the last 5 years have been just deep connection, trust, and just like a daily enjoyment of being around each other. And that's what we're really passionate about giving to everybody else and other couples is you can radically shift the dynamic in your relationship.
I know that a lot of the people watching this show right now have had attachment issues for their entire life. That's why I want to invite every single one of you to check out my attachment repair program. It just might be the jump that you need to go from insecurely attached and lonely and frustrated to fully secure, connected, and bonded in a great relationship like nothing you've ever felt before. Check out my website, adamlanesmith.com, for the attachment repair program. Now, this is a pattern I actually have seen before, and it's actually a little bit different than the one I would describe before. I've had a few clients come to me over the years. I was a marriage and family therapist for many years. Now I work with couples and individuals on relationships, and especially marriages. And there is a pattern that I have seen that is similar to this one, which is women in very religious upbringings, very religious experiences when they're young, They will tie themselves to a man who on the surface talks a very religious game and does love and does follow their religion typically, except he has very deep attachment issues and doesn't really understand that commitment into relationships. He will run away from it. He's not living that faith in his deepest core. And those women, they're trying to compatibility test and say he is a religious man. He says the right things and he's out here doing nonprofit work, caring for people, building orphanages. He must be the right husband for me. So they commit fully to that man. And I have seen that plenty of times play out where then it turns out that's not the case. And she stays with him. A lot of your messaging makes sense now because you talk a lot about the man needs to step up in that role. And in that capacity, I agree that needs to be the case. What was it? You said you wanted to talk about your own story. What was it that drove you to that, not drove you to the point, but drove you to a place where you said, okay, here's what I'm going to do next? What was it that started turning the ship for you?
Well, I don't know if have you guys talked about, I've just seen people post, I learned so much from the comments of my own videos, what people call things these days. I don't know if you guys have heard the term spiritual bypassing.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Okay.
But tell us more for our audience. They may not have heard it.
Yeah. Well, it's a newer term for me too, but basically it's where you use your religious or spiritual beliefs to they're the trump card. So it's like, okay, I'm acting a certain way, but it's because the scriptures say to live this way. Or, honey, you didn't do the thing you said you did. Well, I read my Bible and prayed today, so I've checked that box. So kind of like cool it. Like I'm honoring God, you should be honoring me. It's that idea that if you're honoring your religious beliefs to what you understand them, then your wife should just blanket accept you and basically worship you as though you are without fault. And so for me, when we were hitting rock bottom, which was in 2019, we had some family emergencies. And right before that, I took the position as a children's pastor at a growing church. It was kind of like lots of young families. We were well received, well accepted in that community. And a month in, my wife had found out I'd been lying to her again. I call it inappropriate content because everybody, it's like porn this or whatever. You can categorize your porn, however it was, or whatever agreements you had in your marriage. I had gone outside of those. And the previous 2 years, I had told my wife that I had made a covenant with my eyes before God. And I signed it, prayed through it with my pastor. And I was like, look, I'm not going to lust after other women. I'm not going to fantasize about them. I'm not going to go to naughty websites or naughty Instagram pages. I'm done. I'm done doing that. And I said, we'd had a couple cycles of that. And so we signed it and I prayed. So then anytime she had questions or concerns, I would just say, I'm following my covenant. Don't ask me questions. So that's the spiritual bypassing piece. Like, I signed the covenant before God. And if you're listening to this, you're like, what's wrong with this guy? It's like, look, I was desperate. I was desperate to get out of that cycle, but that didn't heal because I didn't address the roots behind the behavior.
Right. You were deflecting. You were excusing and deflecting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so in 2019, right after I take this position, my wife's like, she finds out I'm lying again. But the previous 2 years, I told her, don't ask questions. We're good. I'm good. I'm done. I haven't done anything. So that was why this last phase of going into our story, of going into this cycle of addiction and lying was so intense because the previous 2 years, I told her, we're good. You don't have to worry about it. And rebuilding trust, as you guys know, like, it takes time in of itself just to rebuild trust. So when you rebuild trust off of a lie, you're just, I don't even know what that's called, but you're starting over even further. And so things got really bad or hit rock bottom because my wife was like, I'm not going through that cycle with you again. I'm just not going to do it. I've believed you. I've trusted you. She said, I need you to go to the root of this. Why you're continuing to lie and hide. Or our marriage we're not really married. It doesn't exist because a marriage is based off of trust, safety, and connection. And we don't have that if you're lying to me and if you're lying to yourself. And also what had made this season at the end of 2019 so intense was I had emotionally numbed out more than I ever had in my life. So from like 10 to 12 at night for the last probably year and a half, I had been just scrolling on my phone, just scrolling on social media, just scrolling. And I had like shut down my ability to feel, except to feel angry. And so here I have this wife weeping in front of me saying, hey, I can't go through this again. And I'm just looking at her with no ability to empathize, really no other plans, because I'm like, I've already told mentors, I've already told pastors and counselors. Counselors just justified my behavior, or I'm not saying all counselors do that, but that's what my counselors had done. And I'm like, I don't know what to do. I felt dead inside. But I see my wife weeping, and we've got 2 little girls, and I'm like, something's got to change. Something's got to change. And happy to dive into the components of what part of the story would be most beneficial. But that's the context for when we hit rock bottom.
What changed for you? Because you say go to the root of it, and I work with clients on attachment all the time, and that's usually the root of it. But I'm curious, what changed? What was the root of it for you?
You talked about accepting love, receiving love. And there was one night when a couple friends of ours came over when we were just like, I mean, you've worked with a lot of couples, so you know when couples are in that, like, frantic's not the right word, but very desperate state. We were in that desperate state. We'd been staying up late, lots of tears, not from me, but from Caitlin, because I couldn't feel anything. But lots of late night talks, lots of like, do we need to live in a separate house right now? And my friends came over, and something broke inside of me where my wife was saying, look, I know you're still lying to me. And for some reason in my mind, I've been trying to cover up the fact I had lied to her. Like, I was almost trying to convince myself, like, look, I'm not a liar. Even though I lied to you yesterday, as I realized I was still keeping more information from you. And something that night broke where I realized, oh my gosh, she's not just loving me through what I did, but she's loving who I became. I lied to her, but she's also loving a person that became a liar and dissociative and checked out. She's saying, look, I want to face this together. Are you willing to step into that? And that there was many, many nights like that, those moments where it was like, she actually wants to love me with the knowledge of what I've done. And I also want to make a disclaimer. There are relationships where one spouse has stepped outside of the marriage, had a physical affair, emotional affair, or there's been an addiction that's been going on for years and years. I'm not just saying just love your spouse blindly and let them run all over you until they finally change. So I want to give that disclaimer. Caitlin was still saying, look, I have a little bit of capacity left if you're ready to dive into this now. And so that was one of those nights that shifted me, where she's like, I'm going to love you as you discover who you've become. As you realize how broken you really are, I'm still going to love you. Are you willing to let that love in? And for the first few years of our marriage, I was just trying to cover up any imperfection, anything that kept me, whether it's ego, pride, anything that kept me from feeling perfect without fault. And I realized, oh my gosh, my spouse can actually be that safe person that can see that I'm imperfect, that can be there when I don't get the job or miss the sale or when life is hard. I'm not actually supposed to push that person away. It's actually the person that gets to see me and be with me, and that I get to exchange with and be in connection with. This is where life gets exciting. So I had so many of those moments where I'm like, I've been pushing the wrong person away because I didn't want to receive the love. I didn't want to let love in. And as we kept walking through this, basically we looked really deep at stories I had told myself as a child. So experiences I had had, like when I got introduced to inappropriate content, when I used social media or different fantasies when I was feeling certain things, all the way down to how I viewed women outside when I was feeling anxious. So the anxious attachment. Mm-hmm. I'm feeling anxious outside. I'm going to look for the cute girl and dissipate that anxious energy, because that's what I did when I was in middle school, when I was in high school. And I kept doing it all the way into my marriage. And so all these really minute, detailed things we started walking through. I was like, oh my gosh, like a life without having to escape, a life that I don't have to escape from, was starting to become more attractive than trying to continue in the same patterns of numbing out, fantasy, dissociation. And I'm still looking at this wife. She's like, look, I'll live in reality with you. I want to know what you're feeling. I want to go there with you. I want to exchange in real connection, real intimacy, because that's what we signed up for. And the longer we kept, I started opening up and saying, okay, I don't know what living like that feels like or looks like, but I'm open to exploring it. I'm open to taking those first steps. I'm open to exploring all that is in reality and see where we can go.
I want to take a moment to invite you to my attachment immersion retreat, the first week of May up in Vail, Colorado, where I'm going to be training and teaching and then practicing attachment skills, relationship skills, and all the communication skills you need to build an incredible relationship. If you want to learn more about this and join me, please check out my website, adamlanesmith.com. There's a retreat link right on there. I'm a big advocate on here for men typically don't change for love and warm feelings. A woman is not going to be able to love you into doing better. She's just not. We usually only change when there's pain, when there's suffering, when there's consequences. What was the pain, suffering, consequences for you? What was it that hurt you so much that you had to say, I can't run any farther. I got to turn back?
That's a great question, Adam. My first counselor, my sex addiction counselor, this was right in 2019. A guy that didn't know me, because everybody loved me, Adam. I was a likable guy. Everybody's like, it's got to be great being married to Brandon. He's a great dad. He's engaged in his church and his community. But this guy didn't know me. He's just like, hey, you've been lying to your wife, and that sucks. Like, you're not a very good guy. That's not very nice of you. And he also said, there's going to be a lot of pain. You're going to lose things. And I'm like, lose things? I've been able to get everybody to like me and love me and accept me, even when I'm making mistakes and deceiving people. Like, I'm not going to lose anything through this. Sure enough, our marriage was too rocky for me to continue in ministry, which I'm actually grateful for. I don't have to be the first one to say, look at how many pastors are having affairs. Look at how many pastors are leading this big thing just for it to implode. So I'm thankful I didn't have to be on the front lines or the headlines of a newspaper as another pastor that did something stupid. So, but I lost ministry. Ministry got taken from me. From the time I was a young adult, I was doing missions work in South America. I came home and was continuing to do ministry, and that was my identity. And so it was very painful to be like, oh, like, I don't have to be anything for anybody right now, but that's scary. We were support raised through our nonprofit, meaning that we had donors that supported us for our small salary. And I'm like, I'm fluent in Spanish, but I have a high school diploma. I don't have any other trade other than ministry. But I can't be in ministry right now because my marriage is at rock bottom and I don't have anything to offer anybody else right now. So that was very painful. And it was like painful and liberating. Also, the pain of just seeing my wife at the state she was. It wasn't the primary motivator, because I think for a lot of wives, they're like, look, is me crying again? Is that not enough for you to change? And I think it was realizing how much damage I had done. And selfishly, it was more of like who I had become. I was like, I don't like how I feel. I don't like feeling numb and emotionless and purposeless. I don't like looking at, like, from an egotistical way, like, do I really want to be the guy that stepped out of ministry and lost his marriage because he wasn't willing to face his past and just shut down? It's like, I didn't like what I was seeing. I was like, oh, she's actually leaving this time. Like, I can't just tell her, like, I'll do it better. She's actually going to leave because she's in so much pain. I think it's from Martin Yusick, Integral Relationships for Men. He said that when the pain of staying is higher than the pain of leaving for a spouse, then that's when they make the decision to leave. It's like, it was going to be more painful for my wife to stay than it would be for her to leave. And I saw how competent she was. I'm like, she could recreate a new life, probably find another husband when she was ready, and she'd be financially well off because she just can get things done. She's a great mom. Like, she's not sticking around because she needs me to keep her alive. Like, so I think it was the pain of realizing my whole life has crumbled and I can't keep building. I can't just keep ascending this spiritual ladder. I can't keep going on like life is good and peachy. It's not working. The way I've been going about this was not working. And so that was very painful. And I say painful and liberating at the same time.
Mm-hmm. What did you do that turned you into a different husband? What was the heart of it? What were the steps you took for it? And I'm asking because a lot of the women out there in our audience right now are listening to this. They're at home. They've got a husband or a boyfriend, and he is not at that place where he's making that choice yet. She's crying. He's not responding to her tears. She's begging him to please give her some emotional connection. And he's saying, I don't even know what that means. Stop complaining. They feel pushed back. They feel discarded. They feel dismissed. And a lot of them right now are listening to this story saying, what did you do different? What am I supposed to watch for him to do? What can I ask him to do? What should a man do to get out of this pit? What did you start doing to get out of this pit?
Huge. First, I want to address that wife that you described. The wife that's listening, I want to share what she can do first. And I think what made my brokenness and like what raised the necessity for my transformation was how clear and clean and healthy my wife was living. She took care of her body. She took care of her emotions. She didn't have a screen addiction. She didn't have an alcohol addiction. She was living, well, there's like in the Christian rock scene, they call it living straight edge or whatever. Like she was living at a very high level. She was saying, my life is valuable. Our marriage is valuable. Are you going to meet me up here or not? So I think for a lot of women in this situation where the husband's checked out, let your life, let your light, like how much light you're emanating, be so crystal clear where it's like he comes home. If you're in that dynamic where say you're at home with the kids, not just stereotyping, but if that's your situation, you were separated, you were apart, and then you come home, like let you be shining, operating at a high level and be like, look, hey, I'm doing good. I'm ready. Are you going to meet me here or not? And that's how my wife was it was like, she wasn't sitting around like kind of just pouting about life. She was like, I'm going to live my life to the fullest. Are you going to join me up here or not?
Being a virtuous woman to call him forward into a better life. That's the core of a good feminine woman, is to call a man to the quest sometimes by presenting him an image of what he's not.
Well, it's an accountability by example, right? So the stuff that you're describing is that when we look at this as a man, we must see ourselves in our own eyes in order to respect ourselves as an equal to our partner and somebody that is worthy of their trust. And the more that somebody is shining and the less that they descend with you into your own personal hell, the bigger the gap is in our mind. And ultimately, it is the feeling that we're going to lose our soul to this, like forever. Not just, metaphorically, but also spiritually, physically, everything. That is the fear that can really turn back a man from the absolute edge of despair. And it sounds like that's what you're describing. And that example is fantastic because it does two things. First of all, it speaks to the man at the deepest core of his being, specifically as a protector, as a husband, as a partner, but also as a spirit entity. And then secondly, it also allows the woman to not lose herself in the same thing, not to follow the man into despair and fall into the same patterns just by trying to be a part of his insanity.
And a lot of women hear that and they say, why should I have to? Why should I have to become this? Why should I have to work that hard? And a lot of them feel like it's for his benefit to rescue him. And in fact, it actually sounds like your wife was living one hell of a life. She was probably enjoying it. She was living a fullness. It wasn't for you. She was doing it. And a byproduct of it was that you became healthier as well once you were ready.
Yeah.
But it was for her spiritual fulfillment that she was actually doing it, not for you.
Adam, you make a great distinction. Andre, what you described too, is she was living this way before she met me. And that was what attracted us to each other, was we wanted to do big things for the world. So we'll just leave it at that. And I saw that she was already moving in that direction. And for any wife that's in like this broken relationship, like whether or not your husband ever chooses to work on the relationship, you deserve to live a great life. So start. You don't need to wait for him to remember Valentine's Day next year. It's start living the way you would like to, so that if he were to meet you today, like, are you even ready for him to meet you at that level of love? And my wife was. And so that's my encouragement. What changed for me? I thought that some of the actions I started taking, I started working with a counseling center in Colorado, and it was just over the phone. And I started doing a couple emotional exercises where I was miming out emotions. Positive ones, negative ones, where you basically like, you could do like 3 sets of 15 seconds where you just mime out what feeling happy feels like or what feeling frustrated feels like. And it sounds so like elementary, but for me that was huge because I didn't know what anything felt like. All I could feel was anxiety and anger, and sometimes I was aroused. But it was like there was no spectrum of emotion. It was just, oh, this I don't like this feeling. I'm anxious. Shut down. And I started doing these exercises with my counselor, and I was like, oh, I can feel upset. I can feel anxious, and then I can feel calm. Like I can actually generate those feelings in my body. And for me, that I didn't know that you could actually choose how you wanted to feel, that you could actually generate an emotion for yourself. I thought I was a victim to, oh, this is a rough day. I'm anxious. I'm going to be anxious until I stare at my phone for 2 hours, and hopefully that feeling eventually dissipates.
That's a regulation technique, though. So a lot of the times what happens, something that Adam and I are working through as well now in terms of concepts, is the regulation. So Adam has this amazing idea of co-regulation between partners. And the absence of the co-regulation between partners simply explains and implies that a man cannot regulate his nervous system independently. If you want to talk about that, Adam, I think that's actually a very relevant point here.
Yeah, I mean, our nervous systems are not designed to operate in a vacuum. They're designed to operate in integration with others, whether that's through prayer, integrating with God in that aspect, and immersing in that connection, integrating with our family early on, a dear friend, integrating with our partner. Men in particular, we can jump into our sympathetic nervous system and go hunt and fight and slave away in the salt mines. But then what do? Well, we come home and we're still buzzing, and maybe we can bring ourselves down to a low level buzz, but it's hard to ever get out of that mode and really immerse into a fully healing, restful state. And a woman, likewise, is if she does not have a protective force around her that's buffering her from the dangers and existential threats of the world, she is chronically locked into that sympathetic nervous system, but hates it because her system is not designed to go up into that like ours is as much. Her system is supposed to be more balanced, more steady, more stable so that she can bear children, nurture those children, nurture us. So when the man goes out and forms that protective barrier, stresses, and then comes home, we are supposed to be able to integrate our nervous system symbiotically with that woman. And we rest as much as we can. We come down so our teeth aren't grinding and we're not vibrating when she hugs us. And then she has been calmed and immersed in peace most of the day, maybe not 100% with babies around, but as much as possible, she integrates with us and we integrate with her, and we receive that nurturing and her gratitude for the work we have done, and she receives that safety, and our nervous systems link. And then what happens is she floods us with oxytocin bonding. Usually what happens first actually is we flood her with oxytocin. We give her a hug, that warmth goes, her system just lights up with oxytocin, and it's overabundant, and it drives her to compulsively give a oxytocin and affection back. And that's why she wraps her arms around you, she rests in you, she plays with you, she does all those good things, and you start to saturate with oxytocin as well, which clicks that man from his symbiotic nervous system, his sympathetic, into his parasympathetic nervous system, where we start immersing in more serotonin produced in the gut. Our vagus nerve stimulates, so our heart beats differently, our breath happens differently. Our immune system improves, so it makes us more resilient against cancer, heart attack, stroke. So she is making us live an additional 15 to 20 years longer with higher quality of life. Our testosterone goes up, our human growth hormone improves, so wound healing improves. This is why they say a woman heals a man's wounds. Well, she emotionally, mentally heals our pain and our difficulty, and as she does this, it actually makes us more resilient against stress because that oxytocin generates GABA, the inhibitory neurotransmitter. So it shuts down cortisol. Now you can say, I'm not going to worry about that. I'm going to worry about that tomorrow. I feel so good right now. And you rest and you sleep and you heal, and you are so much more productive the next day. And this is how we are designed to be symbiotic together, but only when we are operating in the proper channels, as you're talking about and as you're teaching men to do.
Yeah. So I started stepping into that space of actually just understanding what I was feeling. That was one of the biggest first steps. Another one was I started questioning everything I had believed up until that point. And so for anybody from a spiritual background or a Christian background or whatever worldview you come from. I'm not necessarily like just saying throw out your spiritual beliefs. What I'm saying is, I had been very devoted to my Christian life. I prayed a lot, I read my Bible a lot. Like a year and a half prior to our marriage breaking apart, I had fasted for 40 days without food to say, God, like, I want to be a holy man. I want to love my wife. I want to love the world. I lost 30 pounds. I had a lot of spiritual experiences, but my marriage was still the same. Nothing had changed. In fact, I had been lying. I didn't even tell my wife that part of it was what I wanted to address some of my sexual dysfunction. I didn't even tell her. I kept it from her. And so what I had come to this point was I had exhausted what I had understood to be the only path to healing was to praying more and reading my Bible more and getting more involved in ministry. And I wasn't changing. I was just becoming more divided. There was spiritual me, good me at church, and then there was Brandon at home who can't connect with his wife because his nervous system can't handle her. I don't want to be honest with where I'm at. And so that divide got really intense. And then once you step out of ministry, you're like, I guess I'll assess some of my beliefs now. I'll assess how I've approached this relationship. So I started looking at, okay, how do I view, we'll just throw out the devil, temptation. There's this, for anybody listening, you've probably heard these terms thrown around. If you're in a Christian world at all, we have this idea of temptation. Well, COVID happened in 2020 and we weren't going to church, and I forgot about temptation. I forgot that there's supposed to be this evil guy on my left shoulder, wherever he's sitting, that's tempting me to do naughty things that I'm not supposed to do. I actually didn't, that whole paradigm I forgot about, which made me go, I wonder what else I have accepted as what's come through Western Christianity as what we say is normal. These battles we think we're fighting, which are really just constructs we've made to make life a hell of a lot harder. And so I started questioning things. I started saying, do I have this sinful nature? Am I tempted by the devil to do naughty things? Or am I just ignoring childhood wounds? Am I just ignoring, I don't know how to regulate my nervous system? Or am I just blaming my wife for wanting connection and calling her bad for wanting that? And I got pastors to believe me that my wife was codependent because she wanted to spend time together. So I stepped outside. I started questioning. First thing is I got my nervous system going. Second is I started questioning these big overarching themes and topics that handicap you from making any consistent change, because you kind of have to go back to, well, yeah, you can stop looking at porn, but the devil's always going to tempt you to go back. Well, what if we got rid of the devil and he wasn't like this dude that you went everywhere with, and you just actually understood what needs you were trying to get met through your going to pornography, and you address the root behind it, which is, man, I've just been doing that every time I've been anxious for my whole life. I want to figure out what to do when I feel anxious. You can go on a walk, take a shower, you can journal, you can shake your body out for about 2 minutes, and you probably won't feel as anxious. I didn't know that. I didn't know that I didn't have to just run and hide and just accept these narratives that I was always going to be broken. I didn't know that you could actually step into a place of healing and vibrancy. So that piece of questioning things enabled me to drop some of the paradigms I had that also came with the burden and the weight of staying the same.
So, what is it that's really transformed your life now? Like looking back on everything that's happened, it sounds like you fixed your attachment, you fixed the dependencies that you've had, you had this deep, deep self reflection. How is your life now? What has changed? What is the most fulfilling for you in it right now?
Well, I think what's really neat, and I tell this to a lot of men and women, is when you heal your marriage and you start operating on all cylinders, it actually produces life. So in my situation, my wife and I were at the brink of divorce in 2019. And we had 2 daughters at that point that were like 3 and like 11 months. So they were young. And after that, we had 2 more children. So we now have 2 sons. And so one of the most fulfilling things to me is realizing that not only did I not get divorced, but now I have not just 2 daughters, but I also have 2 sons. And I think for me, we have the privilege of living here in Hawaii, and being together as a family and seeing the smiles on my kids' faces and making eye contact with my wife and knowing like if we get stressed or we get off on something, we can come back and connect. We can communicate through anything. We've been through anything. Nothing's going to separate us now. We've been married almost a decade, and I'm not asking life to send me any really hard challenges, but we can make it through anything now. And that feeling of certainty, that feeling of connection, that I have somebody in my court with me, that I just get to enjoy life with, I get to raise a family with, there's no better feeling than that. Not that I'm invincible, but more of if my net worth dropped to zero, if all my social media accounts disappeared and nobody gives a rip what I have to say about marriage, I've got a good one. I've got a good marriage, and nobody can take that from me. And I think for a lot of people, when you look around, we're trying to build things that can be taken from us. Your job, your career, you can get sued and lose all your money. So the whole point of what I'm saying is I feel very wealthy. I feel wealthy as a man to have a wife that loves me and supports me, to have children I have connection to their hearts, and to live in a way that feels aligned to where I'm not going to burn out, you guys. I'm not afraid of, oh, things are getting crazy. Like, I'm going to go numb out. I'm going to go do this, or I'm going to go cheat on my wife. Like, I don't have any underlying pressures building up. And I think so many people live with that it's a really enjoyable way to live when you're not trying to escape the life that you're in. So I'm really enjoying living from a clean slate and from a connected place with my wife.
Okay, that's a fantastic answer. I'm kind of curious because I checked out some of your reels on your social media, on your Instagram specifically, and there's a particular type that you do where you have a very vulnerable conversation with your wife. Now, I can tell you just from working in the space, I can also imagine that a lot of the men who come in and maybe look at some of the content, they may question why you're positioning your wife up on a pedestal to that level. Have you ever had that conversation happen? How did you typically respond to it?
Yeah, well, I get a lot of people. It's interesting. 90% of my following, Adam, you guys could speak to this. 90% of my following is women.
Mm-hmm.
So at first, I didn't know that when I was sharing my story that it would resonate first off with women, whether it's just the platform, what it is. So I recognized I'm speaking to the wife first to then get a chance to speak to the husband. And so there is that unique dynamic. Pretty much every man in my men's community got there through their wife sharing a video with them. And so I kind of just not that I'm like trying to push the frustration or the pain, but almost like, look, guys, I know this is the dynamic you're in. I'm not saying you only got 60 seconds to tell a story, but I was just painting the dynamic we had. So I just try to keep it so crystal clear to what we were experiencing, because that's the easiest thing for me to speak to. And I say, look, I was doing this, she desired this, and I wasn't ready to give that to her. Here's what you can do in that state. So I just basically go back to when I was in 2019 and I was stuck and numb, and I speak to that man, the man that I was. I speak to the problems I was facing. I speak to the dynamic with my wife, and I just sit in that moment and talk about it, because I know so many couples are in that space where they are stuck. And yeah, it bothers some men, but for the men that are curious, I'm the biggest advocate for men being healthy and being whole. And I don't think that necessarily you just need to put your wife on a pedestal and that she has nothing to work on. What's cool is the moment you start taking action, which I've heard this from G.S. Youngblood. I know he's connected with Dr. Glover as well. He wrote The Masculine in Relationship. He lays this out in his book a lot, that the moment you react or respond differently to your wife, you get a different wife. She responds differently to you. And I was like, that's all we're trying to do here, guys, is your wife, she might be crabby. She might be irritable. She might be telling you about it. But the moment you just try a new response, just instead of being like, oh, well, you did this, just say, it sounds like you're really upset right now. Can you tell me more about how frustrated you are with me? How is that impacting you? Just try it and see what happens. It's like, you can't pretend, you can't fake it. But I think it's fascinating because I've watched so many guys who they don't wait for their wife to do something different. They just say, I'm going to respond differently. And you wake up the next morning and you still got a lot to work through, but your wife will respond differently if you respond differently. So that's kind of how I view that. I think it's fun. I think it's fun to ruffle feathers sometimes.
So let's play into this then. So this idea around masculinity, right? So what you're portraying is not a very common view on masculinity, at least not online, right? Masculinity online is often viewed entirely differently, right? Be it as masculine leadership in a more red pilly sense of way, maybe I don't know, like an Andrew Tate style masculinity. Maybe it's, the big tough guy holds in emotions masculinity. Maybe it's a high earner type of masculinity. There's different types that are portrayed. Now, yours is much more soft and gentle. So what is your definition then of proper masculine feminine dynamic if you can show up so vulnerably, even to the point where you're elevating significantly your wife and you're saying, I've done all this stuff wrong, and you are this wonderful person?
I think I tell the guys in my community this, a lot of men's coaches are like, take your ice bath, take your cold shower, be a man. And I tell the guys in my community, like, look, I take cold showers sometimes. I'm a big proponent of warm shower therapy as well. So I'm not really I think now that I'm secure in who I am, I don't feel like I have to prove myself as a man. Because my wife, like, she thinks she's crazy about me. So it's more of like, I feel comfortable entering into those spaces of being, we could say, letting that feminine receptivity, being open to exploring, because I have this vibrancy in my own relationship where I'm not concerned, like, that guy's what do they call me? A beta male or a simp. Like, I don't care, because it's more of, well, if you lived a day in my life, you'd probably want what's happening in my relationship. And I'm very secure in who I am. So I'd say, as far as when it comes to masculine and feminine dynamics, which I think is a helpful paradigm that people can play with, it really depends on your relationship. I am married to, we use the term strong woman. My wife is so wildly capable of running the household. If she needed to, she could probably earn all the income while I sat and played video games. But that she doesn't want that. So she has a very strong masculine capability. And so she's actually looking for me to meet her with my masculine, where we create that symbiotic, supportive environment. So I think for a lot of couples, it's figuring out what the right balance is for them. If your wife is very soft-spoken, is really looking for you to step up and maybe provide some of that more protection for her. And when the neighbor talks to her about your hedges growing out too much and you just you don't say anything, you just disappear into the garage, that's not the dynamic she's looking for. She's looking for you to step up, provide that structure, provide that safety. So I think it really depends on the couple to be able to find that balance, to find that place. My wife creates a lot of structure for me to be able to step into that creative space, to create content, to dream of what's possible and what we're going to do. She helps me with creating lists, which I know usually men create lists, or the action items, or the execution piece. I pull from her masculine strengths to do that. And I step into my feminine flow to be able to create. So we really ebb and flow for our relationship. And I feel secure doing that. So I think it's finding the flow that works best for people depending on their unique relationship.
Mm. Well, it's interesting to me that you're actually describing a relatively rare scenario from an attachment standpoint. And Adam, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's a large number of anxious and avoidant couples. There's a particular anxious avoidant dance. Now, usually it's more frequently, at least, the man is the avoidant, the woman is anxious. You guys had an inverse dynamic, and oftentimes I think that those couples have a much higher risk of separating and splitting up. But you guys were able to make it through, which is quite rare and actually quite significant. Does that sound about right, Adam?
It is. I will say it is so much harder for a couple to come back from the man being anxious, because it is an abdication completely of masculine responsibility. It is pushing masculinity entirely on the woman and saying, you be the man, I'm going to go play video games and look at porn. It is so... it is such a betrayal of the core dynamic of what marriage is supposed to be, that it is very hard for a woman to regrow that respect for him in time, quite often the man waits and waits and waits until she has given up on him. In this case, no, you turn back at the last moment, and that's fantastic. But so often men won't until the woman is completely done and says, I have given up on you completely. And only then is he willing to start kind of looking at his problems. And we see those guys go online and complain about how their wife blindsided them and wouldn't give them a chance, and it's so unfair.
It's like 20 years of worth of chances type
And
of
those
thing.
are the guys that call, Brandon and I both beta males and blue pillars and on simps and things like that. I get that just the same on Twitter because I love my wife. But it is the understanding that masculinity, what it really is the absolute embracing of responsibility. That's what masculinity is absolutely embracing responsibility without flinching in a way that is not domineering, in a way that in fact builds safety and structure for others so that they can step forward into safety, into growth, into fulfillment. The woman can be the person she's meant to be and wants to be. She can come and go from masculine to feminine at times. She can lean forward and pull and then rest, and she can be her fullest self. And this is the embracing of absolute responsibility. And that is the only way that an anxiously attached man can really revitalize his marriage, is to fully embrace it. Absolutely.
Brandon, let me ask you maybe a blunt question, if you may allow me. And if not, then we'll cut it out. But would you say that your wife has lost respect for you at the bottom of that curve that you guys have had in your marriage?
In the present sense, like you think she still has lost respect for me? Or
No. In the past, so that bottom curve of your marriage and like the worst time, did your wife lose respect for you?
Oh, 100%. Yeah,
Yeah.
she didn't have anything. There was nothing to lean on. There was no respect. There was nothing about how I was operating that was noble at all. There was no,
Okay.
no, she had lost complete respect.
And do you feel that your wife respects you now?
Absolutely.
Okay, can you
Yeah.
help us understand, and this especially is so important for the anxious guys at home, of which there are still a very large number. There are anxious guys who can't find a relationship, who've lost a relationship, who's trying to salvage a relationship, or are just in denial that their relationship is in danger. Because they feel they've lost respect of their partner, they just tend to give up. That's the biggest thing that I think anxious men tend to make as a mistake. They just, once the respect is gone, they have nothing to push off of. How did you regain the respect of your wife and then rebuild this marriage of yours?
Huge. I actually get that question a lot from the men I work with. Is I think about leaving my wife, or I think about being with somebody else. And it's that pursuit of respect, or the affection, the desire that somebody's crazy about you, that wants you. And for us, what was a big turning point for me was still when we were in the kind of the heat of our rebuilding our marriage. We were still in 2020. Things are still like sensitive, but we'd worked through some significant blocks in our healing. Is often when my wife would express frustration or disappointment, I retreated. I got smaller. I pulled away a little bit. It's kind of like a dog, how they tuck their tail when they've eaten something they weren't supposed to. That was my response to her. And it only kind of fueled her feeling more frustration and disappointment. From learning some of those emotional exercises of like actually acting out the emotion I want to feel. One day we were arguing, or she was sharing her pain. We were actually arguing. She was just sharing her pain. And we were laying in bed, and instead of just listening to her talk, laying passively, I stood up and came to her side of the bed and got in like a boxing position and said, "Tell me more." Not that I was like going to fight her, but just like, "Tell me more. I can take this. That's all you got." And she melted. She was like, "Oh, come snuggle me." I was like, "What?" Like I was like, "That was it? Like you just wanted to be at your messiest state and see me say, I can take that. That's all you have. Like that's all the mess you could throw at me. All your messy emotions. That's it. Like I can totally handle you in this state." And that was one of the most significant things that rebuilt our connection and her respect for me, was me having capacity for her when she was angry and not disappearing into the background. And so for anybody listening, like if you want your wife to respect you again, let her know that you can handle her when she's feeling anything. not that it's your responsibility to like get her to act a certain way all the time. I'm just saying, like, when your wife is sharing that she's hurting, those are your opportunities to rebuild that respect. And I got consistent at doing that and not shying away from the pain, from the frustration, from the conversations, and being like, yeah, let's go there. I can handle that. What else? Tell me about it. I'm here for that. And as I kept doing that, she was just like, oh, thank goodness he can handle me. He's not trying to disappear. He's not trying to minimize the situation. He can handle me in all of my strength, in all of my directness. He's willing to be with me in that moment. And as I continued to do that, that's when the respect was rebuilt.
What gave you the strength, instead of running away to porn, video games, or even just saying nothing, laying there and pretending you were asleep? What gave you the strength to get up and actually go embrace our feelings like that? What was it in you that gave you the strength? Was it the backing of good men who had counseled you? Was it faith? Was it you ate some extra steak that day, so your testosterone was like, what was it? What gave you the strength to get up and go be the man in that moment and take that?
I just got tired of living the way I was, Adam. I kept looking at my strategies, I call them, for how I was coping with life. And I was just like, this isn't fun. I'm not enjoying life this way. Like, I know I want to be having these conversations. I know I want to work through this, but this passive response, this, let's just go to bed. Let's get through this. And hopefully I got a couple hours tomorrow. I can watch YouTube videos. I just kept waking up and looking at myself as I was becoming less numb, because I wasn't on social media at the time. I wasn't numbing out. And I just kept looking at myself. I'm like, I am a passive, sorry excuse for a man. And that's not at my core. That's not who I am. And I believed that I was something better than that. So I just got tired of seeing the strategies I was using to try to get my problems to disappear, to get my wife's problems to disappear. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to try a different response. I have nothing else to lose. I don't like where I'm at in life. I'm broke. I'm in a broken marriage. I'm ready to try something else. So it was kind of just this, I don't have any other option. I'm not going to keep living this way, because I do believe I'm going to do big things with my life. And it's going to start with getting out of bed and actually being emotionally present for my wife.
Okay. So, Adam, I'm kind of curious because, again, this is a rare and less talked about circumstance, mostly because a lot of the men who are in the same position as you, as Brandon, they're struggling with a huge amount of shame and they're struggling with a huge amount of guilt, which is why we actually don't usually hear this type of story. So, Adam, here's a question for you. What did Brandon and his wife do right to have such an amazing turnaround from an attachment standpoint? And they didn't even take very long. Like 2020 was only 5 years ago. So,
well, a few things really stand out to me. One is always a strong shared religious faith, so that you have principles to go back to. When you have to solve a problem, you can agree on what's right and wrong. When you have a deeper purpose, that helps, because you have a framework for what is right and what is wrong, and that helps an awful lot. They had a vision for man and woman, basically husband and wife, and that was a good thing. They had defined roles, which is excellent. That's necessary so that they could say, am I measuring up or am I not? That's also very helpful. We have to have that. We need an objective answer. They also had one partner actively knowing what was going on, and that's very rare. That's crucial. In this case, the wife. It's often the wife who seeks the answers first. Your audience is primarily women. A lot of my audience is women too, to be honest with you. They want answers, and they're willing to seek them out. And her changing herself and being that beacon, that virtuous woman who's ready to push. And then it was actually him also having good men around him. So he understood that men can be good. A lot of men don't have that. And they don't even understand that model is there. And finally, it was his really pain, his disgust with himself. A man has to be disgusted with himself and believe that there's a better way of being, and then believe that he has the strength in some fashion to get there. And if he can do that, all of a sudden the porn is not as shiny, the video games are not as satisfying, everything starts to drop away, and he says, nothing is going to satisfy me till I get this out. And then he aggressively pursues the man he wants to be. And it sounds like this was the story. This was the hero story of rising from that point and becoming the man that you were supposed to be. That's exactly how the journey is supposed to happen.
Okay. Well, that's an amazing insight. And I'm kind of very curious, Brandon, how do you guys negotiate with your wife in your relationship? Because it sounds like you
How do you
guys had to negotiate a lot, and I gotta say, evidently, it worked.
Could you give me a little more context when you mean negotiate?
Sure. So a negotiation, above all else, is a finding of a mutually acceptable solution. So a mutually acceptable solution can come in two ways. It can either come as a manipulation, where you kind of coerce, first force, trick, you know, or even deal your partner into something that you think is going to be beneficial, or it can be what's the term you use?
Persuasive.
Persuasive. There you go. Persuasive. So Adam has a fantastic term around persuasive negotiations, where you actually will go and find that mutual win-win, going out of hope and inspiration and trust, ultimately trust in the future of the relationship and its potential. So that's two types of negotiation. And then there's also leverage. Leverage is not negotiation. It's actually the kind of the lowest form of influence, where you simply force. Say, if I'm the breadwinner or have this power, you will do this or else there will be consequence, which is the dehumanizing approach. So I'm kind of curious, how do you guys approach this ability to solve complex problems together and maybe find a common ground where there seems none to be found?
Yeah. Well, I think Adam brought up a good point. We have a very shared vision for our life already. And so that we have a lot of filters. What I mean by filters is like decision-making filters that we're able to use that make decision-making pretty simple. So we both value quality time together as a family. With 4 children, we spend the majority of our free time outside in nature. And so for us, when it comes to what are we going to do with our time when we're having the conversations around that, look, I love working. I love sharing my message with the world, but I was at the beach before this podcast with you guys, and I had to kind of make sure I was keeping an eye on the time to get back for the podcast. So we actually really value a lot of the same things, which is time together, time with the kids. We eat the same way. So we could talk about how my wife persuaded me more around health. She really spearheaded finding whole foods that were more beneficial and advantageous to our body. And when we were at potlucks, I'd try to sneak a bunch of things that just ultimately made me feel like crap that night or the next day. So she persuaded me into healthy eating, but really it was more by example and benefit than having a bunch of conversations. So that's typically how we make decisions together, is what is the overall benefit for the relationship? What's the overall benefit for the family? And we're pretty aligned with that, even with some of our spiritual ponderings as you can use the word deconstructing a lot of our belief systems. We had a very safe net that even when we were really in a rocky place in our relationship, we still kind of held like, look, we're going to keep Jesus, but we're going to wrestle with a lot of the other things we've been told. And we both were on the same page with that. So I think for us in negotiating and making decisions, what drew us together was we felt so aligned on how we wanted to live our life. We haven't had a TV our whole relationship. I still numbed out on my phone, but we don't do screens with the kids. We had this core belief of this is how we want to live. We want to impact the world in a big way. And it really helps us filter out a lot of the distraction, a lot of the lesser things, to where we actually don't get in a lot of arguments around decisions. We're so aligned that it's kind of like some couples we hear from, they're like, they don't even know how their spouse's coffee shop business is going that they started 2 years ago. I'm like, you guys don't talk. Like, we talk a lot. We talk at night when we get the kids down. We spend 30 minutes to an hour on the couch. We just enjoy our time together. So it's like, we know what's going on in each other's world. We're on the same page. We're going in the same direction. For us, we usually know what the other person's thinking, and we're usually on the same page. So it doesn't really, we don't run into it too much where it's like, I really think we should buy the BMW, and my wife doesn't. Actually, great example. I don't really share this story often. I wanted to buy a sports car. It was completely unnecessary. It was just for fun. My wife said, I think this is a stupid idea. I don't think you actually want the car. Do you know what she said though, guys? I'm okay with you doing it. If you need to have that experience, go ahead and do it. I bought the car, and now I'm getting ready to sell it because she was right. I don't actually drive it. I said I always wanted it. And she, in that moment, she said, look, I think this is a bad decision. However, I'm okay with you having the experience to learn whatever you need to learn. So that's kind of how we try things, is kind of like, hey, look, if I'm not in agreement on this one, and I'm not saying, for as a disclaimer, don't just let your spouse buy anything that they want just to not talk through it. But we talked through it. Even with our coach, we talked through it. And it was still like, yeah, sure, go ahead if that's what you need to do. So that's an example of we weren't in alignment, but we were still in alignment together.
Okay. That's a pretty good answer. Adam?
That's a good answer. I like that.
Adam approved?
No, yeah. Oh, I see.
It's rare for me to get an answer that's like flat out Adam approved.
No, it is. So, yes, absolutely. I've had many of the same discussions with my wife where it's like,
You wanted a sports car?
no, but you know,
man.
other things. It's
Adam,
not.
hey, do you want to buy mine?
In Hawaii?
Say, look at the sales pitch. Love the hustle. Yeah, you'd have to swim it across the ocean. No, this is how a relationship is supposed to function. Is, hey, look, I'm having this feeling or this thought or this experience. Well, I'm not threatened by that, but that's weird. So tell me more. And then you talk about it. And when it's a non-threatening thing like a sports car, right? It wasn't like I decided to take a mistress and I'm going to buy a sports car. It's okay. Well, that seems kind of weird and it seems a little dumb. But if you really need to do this, then we could absorb this. Why don't you go ahead and do what you need to do, right? That freedom inside the relationship, that is what a relationship is supposed to be. When people are avoidantly attached, we've had a few on the show, they believe they have to absolutely give up every ounce of freedom inside of a relationship and become the mental slave of the other person. That's not so. And in a relationship like this, yes, there are guardrails around the harmful things, but you talk through the other experiences and then you have the other experiences. That's a healthy relationship dynamic.
Yeah, well, it's interesting for me because for me, I've been rather avoidant for a long time. So I'm coming at this from an entirely different perspective from you, Brandon. I've been working with Adam on that for the last 3 years. For me, you know, I'm engaged, I'm getting married soon, and
almost got it.
He almost got it. And it's so interesting to hear the perspective of someone who has tackled this issues. You know, obviously I had my internal challenges. They might have been different challenges, but challenges nonetheless from a collaborative standpoint. For me, even to this day, all the stuff I got to fix on my own. And the amount of input that people get into my life is very limited. So the way of living where somebody has so much influence and control over your life, to me, it sounds kind of weird. I'm not going to lie, kind of different. But I can see the attractive point in it because it just allows you to be so much yourself and so comfortable.
Well, did you hear what he said, though? He didn't go to his wife and ask permission. Honey, please, may I buy this car? And she didn't say, okay, I'm going to choose to allow you to buy this car, pat on the head. It's not an abdication of it. But he also didn't go and say, I'm buying this car and there's nothing you can do to stop me. And she goes, well, I don't know if I like that. Well, too bad, right? It's you notify your wife. This is the masculine leadership. You're not begging. You notify your wife of an experience or of a thought or of a feeling, and she works with you, or a need, and she works with you to try to get that taken care of, but she has input. You're not begging permission, but you're also not just shoving her aside. You're co-creating the decision together with you as the head and her advising and making sure it's going to work appropriately. And that's a healthy masculine-feminine dynamic right there.
I find that making decisions becomes easier with having, I can overdo it where it's like I'm seeking her thoughts on what I'm looking to make a decision on. Sometimes I just need to make a dang decision. But it's kind of like a free research team. You know, your wife has all this data about you and what you like, and when she sees you at your best, and she's kind of removed from the situation from what you're experiencing. She can kind of see, okay, how will this actually impact him? He thinks it's going to impact him in a certain way. For the sports car, she's like, you're not really the car guy. You don't like driving fast. You appreciate a sports car when you see it drive by. She's like, my guess is you probably aren't going to be that crazy about it after you have it. And I was like, no, this is going to be good. She's like, okay, you've wanted one your whole life. So let's go ahead and do it. So it's more of those advantages is I find that my wife saves me a lot of time in as far as making mistakes. I'm able to make fewer mistakes because we collaborate on a decision. And then it's like, hey, you know, like a big decision like buying a house or where you're going to live. I think that trying to make that decision in a vacuum alone is very difficult. I think, especially when you think about having kids and how will this impact the kids? You're right. I didn't think about our baby. We have a baby. We got to think about the baby. So I think the wife bringing her perspective more, it just enhances that decision-making process for our relationship. Is she'll bring things to me, whether we're talking about something relationally that she's working through, a decision she wants to make, she'll get feedback from me. And it's this very collaborative experience where we feel empowered by one another to make the best decision for us individually and as a unit.
Okay. It's quite inspirational. Thank you, Brandon. Now, I do have a last question for you, and this is for the guys back home who are feeling anxious, who maybe have a dependency or an addiction or problem, or even just a very strong partner. What advice would you give them so they can get to your stage and into your shoes?
I would tell that guy the emotion that you're trying to avoid or the anxiety. A lot of guys are running from a feeling that literally takes a couple minutes to filter through your body. And so what I mean by that is you might have been running your whole life. You ran into a relationship to try to get this feeling of inadequacy of whatever you were feeling to try to go away. So then you got married. You're in this committed relationship now and the feeling hasn't left. The stakes just got higher. And so what I want you to think about is, what if you stopped running from that feeling of discomfort, of that unpleasant energy of anxiety in your body? What if you actually let it filter through you? What if you let it flow through you? So what I mean by that is, the next time you feel super anxious, well, that's with your spouse, with a situation at work, what if you took one step differently? Instead of getting on your phone and pulling out social media and going to take a dump, what if you took 5 deep breaths? What if you went on a 10-minute walk instead of sitting in the break room on your phone? And so that's what I want to tell you guys is, until you create the pattern interrupt, you're not going to feel differently. But it's those little micro decisions to face the same stimulus that you faced before with a different response that builds that muscle where it's like, I'm anxious. What do I do? Your parents were supposed to teach you how to co-regulate, but if they didn't teach you what to do when you felt anxious, you had to figure it out on your own, and you had limited choices to make as a child. So now as an adult, you're teaching yourself how to regulate your nervous system. I feel anxious. I feel discouraged. How do you want to respond in those moments? When you make a conscious choice, you can create a new automated pattern that rolls over into your relationship, where it's like, my wife is really upset right now. I usually tell her I don't remember what she's talking about. Instead, I'm going to say, I see you're really upset. Let's sit down and talk about this. So it's those little micro decisions that will change everything. And ultimately, I'll drop the bomb for you guys. If you're living with a high level of secrets, of hiddenness, you're going to feel anxious no matter what. Whatever you choose to do, you're still going to feel anxious, because marriage and love is about creating safety where the other person isn't being hurt by your behavior either. So you got to get all the secrets out. After you've gotten the secrets out, take action to restore your nervous system, to restore your ability to connect emotionally, and start enjoying the woman you chose to marry.
That's some very good advice. Okay, I got to ask you then the second question. I was going to only ask one, but this was so good I want to ask two. What would you tell your daughters the day of their wedding about marriage?
Man, gonna make me think about that day already. My oldest is only almost 8. I don't think I'd tell them anything on the wedding day. Wow. My hope would be, you guys, is that what they saw me model in my marriage to their mom would have set such a clear expectation for them that they chose a man that would be able to give them what I believe I'm giving my wife, which is a secure love and a healthy home. So I would hope that from the last 18 years that they saw how I lived and what I modeled to such a degree that they had such high standards that there would only be a man that was healthy enough and whole enough. They would be a resemblance of what I am. So that would be, I would hope to have lived by example. Obviously, many, many conversations, but ultimately a life lived in accordance with those beliefs.
And are you feeling happy with yourself as a man as you currently stand?
Yeah, I'm very happy, very fulfilled.
Good stuff. Well, Brandon, this has been quite a fascinating and deep dive conversation. Thank you very much for your openness and for sharing. And congratulations on pulling through and fixing your marriage and setting up this beautiful family of yours. Where can people find you to learn more about what you do?
Yeah, I'm sharing content, short thoughts, direct to camera sometimes, and with my wife as well. At Brandon Talks Marriage. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. And we're actually about to release a podcast as well. So you can find all of that on my social media. And the primary way that I help men is through my Grounded Men's Community app. That's going to be a link in my bio. We can also put a link in the show notes. But I teach men how to implement these changes in their nervous system and their emotions. I have a weekly group coaching call where I empower men to work out these changes in a community of a safe community of other men that are doing the same things, that have the same questions, that are in a very similar space. Their wife said, "Hey, we got to get this figured out." And so if you are a man ready to take those next steps, either send me a DM on Instagram or click the link below and apply for a spot inside of the community.
Thank you, Brandon. Adam, where do we find you?
Yeah, I'm Adam Lane Smith, the attachment specialist. You can find me on adamlanesmith.com. With me and my certified attachment coaches, we can walk you through the attachment repair program, where in 90 days, you can go from anxiously attached or avoidantly attached to securely bonded to the partner you're with, or ready to find a partner who is securely attached. Check me out on adamlanesmith.com.
Thank you very much, guys. Brandon, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much for coming onto the podcast. It's been great to have you as a guest. And everybody who's feeling anxious, who's feeling uncertain in their relationship, if you're keeping secrets as a man, listen to this and reflect and discuss with yourself if this is the man that you want to be and if this is the man that you want your daughters to model themselves after in their future relationships. Just as Brandon has, provided with his answer, ultimately that is what's going to happen because what they see is what they're going to follow. And Adam can certainly attest to that from an attachment theory standpoint. So this is a good reflective episode, and I would love to see your questions in the comments down below. Brandon, also when we post the episode, check them out. Maybe you'll have some people really looking to dig into that experience and asking you some questions as well. So please share your thoughts. What has stuck to you? Where are you getting stuck? Who's helping you through these transformations? And more importantly, why are you doing this? Why are you helping your man do this as a woman? And what are you looking to get out of this? That's all questions I would like you to ask yourselves. And in the meantime, subscribe, share, and follow us on social media at I Wish You Knew. And we're checking out. We'll see you in the next one. Thank you.